Hi everybody. We're going to be working on Chapter 1 in Effective Reader and Chapter 1 in your Ready to Read More book, so you're going to have both of them open. In Effective Reader, you're going to be on page 11, and in the Ready to Read More book, you're going to be on page 6. Okay? Now, I'm going to have to break this video down into shorter than 10 minutes each, so I might have to do 2 or 3 parts, so you might have to look at 2 or 3 different videos because of the way I need to save these files. Okay, let's start with the reading process. How do you read? Do you just sit down and read through it and maybe understand it or not understand it, and then, well, maybe you didn't understand it, so you think, let me read it again and see if I understand it a second time? I'll give you a little piece of advice. If you didn't really understand it the first time, the second reading is really not going to help you. I'm going to show you a technique using the information in both of the books. It's called the reading process, and what it is the Effective Reader book calls it SQ3R. I'm not too thrilled about the expression because it's kind of difficult to remember all the letters, but I'm going to go through each of the letters and I'm going to explain what they are. Okay, let's start with the S. S is survey. Survey means let's collect as much information as we can before we read. And that information is very easy to understand. It helps create a foundation for us, and inside that foundation we're going to have a good starting point, so when we actually read the article or the chapter or the section in our textbooks, it's easier to understand. Okay, you never sit down and read first. You do the reading process first. Okay, so S is survey. I call it previewing, and let's use the Ready to Read More chapter 1, page 6 in story first. Okay, it's called Meet the Oldest Person in History. So let's survey it. Let's go through an example of this. Okay, you're going to need some highlighters, and if you don't have any, don't worry about it right now, but you're going to need some because it's going to make it easier. Pencil and pen is not going to be obvious enough. Highlighters are in color, so you can highlight specific pieces of information so they tell you stuff, and inside that information you're going to be able to grab the ideas much faster because you'll be able to see the orange, pink, blue, and green. Get orange, pink, blue, green, and if you can, get purple. If you have yellow, use it as your last possible color because yellow is very difficult to see. Okay, pick a bright color like orange. Now, look at the title of the story, Meet the Oldest Person in History. Well, what do you know just by looking at that? You know the story is going to talk about oldest person in history. That's a beginning. Okay, now look underneath it. You see a French woman sets a record. That little title underneath the big title is called the subtitle. Okay, now you know that the oldest person in history was a French woman. Now I have more information to work with. I still don't know the information, but I have something to start with. Reading, especially textbooks. Think about this if you're doing business or finance. A lot of students study medical fields. Think about the chapters in your books that you're going to be reading that are really long and they have a lot of vocabulary and they're complicated topics. You have to start with something that you already know. You can never learn something new unless you use something you already know. Okay, so we know about old people, we know about history, we know a French woman. Okay, now you also see a picture. That picture is a picture of the oldest living person in history. Okay, the little sentence underneath the picture, Jean-Louise Calment celebrated her 120th birthday in 1995. That's called the caption. Now in that caption, you have more information. You see the person's name, Jean-Louise Calment. You know it was her 120th birthday, and you know that took place in 1995. Okay, now highlight you highlighted in orange the title, you highlight the subtitle, you highlight the caption underneath the picture. Now also in this particular story, and this doesn't always happen in textbooks, but in this particular book they like to do that. You see four phrases or sentences or questions written in orange or red or whatever color you want to call it. Okay, those are called section headings. And section headings are also called major supporting details. Now, how many major supporting details or major supporting ideas do you see? You should see 4. Who is the oldest person in the world? A lifetime of memories, making records, what was her secret to longevity? Okay, you're going to highlight each of those in orange also. All the orange is going to talk about the things that you surveyed before you read. Okay, now look at the information. Oldest person in history, French woman, who was it, lifetime of memories, making records, her secret to longevity. Each one of those pieces of information are connected. And they connect back to the whole big thing called the topic. When I look at all of these pieces of information, I can ask you the question, what is the topic of this reading passage? The topic is going to be 1 or 2 words. If I say to you, in 1 or 2 words, tell me the idea of the story. And you can say, old French woman. Or you could say, oldest person. You could say oldest person in history. It doesn't have to be exactly 2 words, but it's not going to be a sentence. The topic is an idea. An idea is simply a word or a group of words. There's no grammar. There's no subject verbs. There's no sentences. You don't have to get into all of that. Okay, so if I say to you, what's the topic of this story? You can say oldest person in history. French woman, oldest person in history. Things like that. Don't get into the sentences as I said. Okay, now that is your S. I call it also preview. That's your S, that's your preview, that's survey. That is gathering, collecting the information that you want to start with. Okay, you have to start someplace. Okay, now Q in the SQ3R that you see in the on page 11 in Effective Reader. Q is question. Question is what you do before you read. Now what I want you to do is take out a piece of paper right now. You could use a pencil or a pen. It doesn't matter. Now I'm going to tell you to stop the video a couple of times, but don't stop it now. Okay. Look at the first major section. Who is the oldest person in the world? Now before you read that paragraph, say to yourself, what information can I learn from this? Or what questions do I want to ask myself or the writer of the story, and then write them down? For example, who was the oldest person in the world? You can write down number 1, what was her name? Number 2, when was she born? Number 3, where was she born? Number 4, when did she die? Number 5, how long did she live? Number 6, was she married? If she was married, what was her husband's name? Number 7, did she have any children? If she did, how many? What were their names? Number 8, did she have any grandchildren? If she did, how many did she have? What were their names? Now, notice something. I asked this, and I'm not reading the story. I asked this before I read the story. Now, I did a sample of questions that you can do for the first section. It's your turn. Now, write on a piece of paper. Stop the video in a second. Write on a piece of paper, what questions do you want to ask that, and you will find the ask before you read about the lifetime of memories. Then make 3 or 4 questions. Then go to making records. What questions can you ask about the section on making records? Then finally, what questions can you ask? What was her secret to longevity? Now what I'm going to do is, I'm almost out of my 10 minutes, so I'm going to stop here. Then when you finish making your questions, come on back. There will be part 2 that you can view while we're going to continue to talk about the reading process.